to the novel coronavirus resource directory, which has been put together by Elsevier to support our health and research communities who are working to fight against this coronavirus pandemic that we are having. So we have created a range of free resources, free articles, free papers, including textbooks. We understand most of you are having to do with classes at home. So there are textbooks being made free by Elsevier, and there are the tools which Elsevier has. There has been made again free to use for our users. Like we have different tools which can help you uh, in working out against all the treatments and remedies you're trying to work on and the research that you're doing on coronavirus. So we have multiple tools like Reaxys, Embase, SciVal, etc., which are made free. So you can just visit this novel coronavirus resource directory. I have given the URL over here, or else you can just go onto Google and type this and you'll be directed to this site. So you'll find something or the other for the academic researchers, for healthcare practitioners, for nurses, medical students, for librarians, how they can benefit from all the material that is available from Elsevier. Just to give you a very basic example and how the tool has actually helped the corona warriors on ground. So let me just give you an example of our tool, Pure. So this portal has been made free for people working on coronavirus at this moment, where you can look for research collaborations across the globe. And one of the scientists, Dr. Vishal Rao, he's working with HCG network in India. He's part of the advisory committee of the government of India working on the COVID-19 task force. So he has been using our coronavirus directory for information for his work, and he reached out for looking at possible collaborations, and we directed him to this Pure Portal service we are giving out for free right now, and he was able to shortlist people who are working in similar areas as him, and where he can exchange and have a collaboration based on their expertise. And he's now working together with few of American scientists to develop a trial on the convalescent plasma therapy for coronavirus. So this is how the tools can help you, besides not only giving you information on what is happening on ground on coronavirus. So please do visit the website. So now moving on to our experts, let me introduce you first to Dr. Anthony Newman. You already are familiar with him by seeing his video that was published earlier for this presentation. So Dr. Anthony Newman is a senior publisher with Elsevier and is currently based in Amsterdam. We're really thankful to him. And currently he's responsible for around 15 laboratory medicine and biochemistry journals. He has a work experience of more than 20 plus years as a publisher, and he has been working with Elsevier for a very long time. That's almost 30 years. And before working as a publisher, he was working as the marketing communication manager for the biochemistry journals of Elsevier. By training, he's a polymer chemist, and he was active, he was active in the industry. So he was working in London, and in 1987, he moved to Amsterdam to join Elsevier, and since then, he's there. So we are really privileged to have so much experience with us, and you will be able to interact with him freely during the course of the session today.
So, of course, it was a long slide set, 120 slides. This is just a fraction of those, just to remind you what's going on. Or for those who haven't yet had a chance to watch the recording, what it's about. Of course, we've got to publish papers. If you don't publish them, your research never existed. And that's the reality. Without publishing it, No one knows you did it. It might be just as well you didn't do it at all. So that's the important thing. So you've got to publish just to show what you've done. And what you're going to publish, of course, is good, sound research, not things you've done before, but good material, and that's essential. Now, is this going to work? Is moving on? It does. Great. There's lots and lots of journals out there. You, the scientists, and all your colleagues over the whole world produce almost 2 million articles a year that get published. It's really impressive. And that gets spread over about 28,000 journals. And so there's lots of choice. You just choose the right journal. You don't choose a journal just by impact factor. You choose it by where it will be seen by the audience, your peers in your field. And that's the important thing to do. What sort of paper you're going to write? Well, of course, it's going to be either a full-length paper, or it's going to be a short paper, or it's going to be a review, or whatever. And there's different varieties and sort of and flavors around nowadays. But basically, the normal thing is a full-length article, original article, 8, 10, 12 pages. And sometimes you might do a short report, like a case report, or just a quick 1 or 2 pages, just to get your information out there. And review papers are different again. But again, there's lots of ways to get your material out there. And of course, even you can put things up beforehand as in some sort of data repository. That's also something I'll cover a bit later. And there's new article types and so on. Yeah, lots of options. You just got to be aware of all these options are there and use them most appropriately. So to find the right journal, so that's the important thing to me, is to find who would you want to read your article, and what are they reading? Because if they're reading that journal, if they find articles in that journal appropriate, then it's useful. If they are not reading that journal, but you think you will publish there because it's a higher impact factor, that's a bit of a sidetrack. You really need to be thinking about the needs of the reader, not the needs of the author. All the way through your writing, always think of what will the reader think of this? What will the reader benefit from this? Will the reader understand this? And with that focus, you make a better, clearer paper. Of course, when you're writing, you've got to have the scientific language. Well, what's that? We're not taught how to write science. So you've got to write with clarity, objectivity, accurate, and be as brief as you can. And that's a challenge, of course. Sentence instructions got to be neat. You've got to have this logical line running through the whole article. The tense is got to be right. So when you write your introduction, it's got to be normally present tense or past tense. And then looking at all the results, and the methodology is all past tense. And then, of course, your conclusion and the discussion is present tense and future tense. Grammar, that's the thing that trips up people who are not well schooled in English, and we do need to publish in English. It's the language of science currently. It might be something different in 50 years' time, but for us now, it's English. And always use either British English or American English, not a mixture of the two. And that's important also. So it's just little tips and tricks. The guide to authors will help you. Some journals insist on American spelling or in British spelling, but they're rare. Just see what it says in the guide to authors. The guide to authors is just what it says. It's a guide to help you get your manuscript better able to be evaluated by the peer review process. This is, if you watch the whole 2-hour video, this is the fish. Why a fish? Well, it's a picture. We were thinking pictures. So this is a layout of a research article. I think you can see my mouse. Research article, review articles are different. But a research article, you start off with the head, then you've got the body and the tail. So the head, title, abstracts, keywords. Then you've got the main text, introduction, methods, results, discussion. And then finally, the conclusion, enlargements, and so on. So that's the 3 bits of the research article. That's how you read them. This is the logical line running through your article, so it makes it easier for the reader to understand what's going on. And so the top bit can be seen anywhere in the world, because you don't have to be inside a university IP address or anything else. The rest is linked to whatever your journal's access is across the world. And so that's the layout, but that's not how you write it. You write it by using the sort of like building a wall. Think of it like the fish layout is how you lay it out. But to build it, think about starting with your comfort zone, your figures and tables, your data. Then you describe your methods and then the results, and you discuss those. Then you write your conclusion, then introduction, then title, abstracts, and keywords. And that is far easier. It saves you having a sort of a mental block when you come to writing your article, because this way it flows easier. Once you've done all these apps, you then take the bricks apart and lay it out as a fish model, as it were. Cover letter. I think it's a bit strange. I'm going to click through this. Anyway, do you need to do a cover letter? No. Should you? Yes, always. It's a way to tell the editor why your paper is important. Some editors rely tremendously on the cover letter and some don't. You don't know who is what, but basically what's special about your manuscript? Why should it go into this journal? It doesn't get published as cover letter, doesn't get seen by referees, so therefore it's your chance to talk to the editor. So always do that, and then if they ask you when you're submitting to suggest potential reviewers, do that also, because unfortunately there are so many articles being sent in and the number of reviewers against that is less, and so some reviewers just get a bit burnt out, and so the editor's always looking for new referees to find the right people to send your paper to. Of course, before it even gets sent out, it has to go through the first process of the evaluation by the editor. Is it good enough to send on? But the idea is that they have a few ideas themselves of who your paper should go to. But you should also give them a few suggestions, because that makes it easier for them. They might say, oh yeah, I forgot that person. Yeah, right. I'll send it to him, her. Or it might be that they ask their people and they all decline because of pressure of work or not their topic area. And so they look at your suggestions and then they will send out to one or two of those people. Of course, you should not ask these potential reviewers to add to your list because it's confidential. It's anonymous peer review. If you ask them, then they get invited. They'll have to decline because it's assumed that you know there might be a reviewer. So don't ask the reviewer. The also thing that the reviewers should be different parts of the world. They shouldn't be, of course, your close friends. They shouldn't be people you worked with before in the last 2 or 3 years. They should be perhaps 3 to 6 people, and always give the institutional address, an institutional email address if you can, because that has that sort of authenticity which you need to share with the editor. And this is this looks complicated, but this actually is what happens when you submit your manuscript. You submit it, it goes to the editor. Well, first there's a filter here. We check what's the plagiarism level, are all the figures good quality, and so on. And then what happens, it goes to the editor, and the editor says, is it good enough English? No, that's a rejection. Is it within scope? No, rejection. Is it look like it's okay? All right. Who's the best 2 people in the world to ask? And ask these people, and hopefully both of them say yes. If one says yes, one says no, they'll find someone else. And then these people give a recommendation, and they recommend either accept or reject or revise. And when both recommendations are in, some journals have 3 people to recommend. The editor makes a decision. Accept as is, very, very rare, 1 in 200. Reject, typically about 30%, and then revise. Now, some of these never got through this process. They were desk rejected. So together, the rejections as desk rejects and rejections from the referees typically are 50, 60, 70% of the articles get rejected in my field of life sciences. So that's a lot, but 30% sort of make it. They go through a revision process. So that gives you an idea. It's not just nothing happening there. And sometimes what happens is that the reviewers are slow. They want, as an author, to be fast with their paper, but as soon as they be given a review, they think, oh, I can take 2 weeks, 3 weeks. That's why sometimes also it takes longer than the editors will wish to have your paper processed. That's the way it goes. So this is just a sum up, sort of an overview of the 2-hour talk I gave and I give around the world, normally in person, but with lockdown virtually. This is the first virtual event like this I've done, so it's interesting for me to do this. And so you've got to be consistent. Check, double check, make sure you tell a story that's logical. Referees' comments are essential. Make sure you take them all on board. That should mean you're one of the 30% group, not the 70% group. And that's what you want, being one of the 30%. Now, here's, I said I'll put this slide up before I stop sharing. I'll leave it up for a few minutes while we're starting to do some of the Q&A. But this is the Researcher Academy, which is one place where all of our material is collected. It's an amazing place with all sorts of free content, checklists, downloads, webinars, documents you can download. Wonderful. This thing I was telling you about, which you hopefully many of you looked at, is here, and that's this 2-hour pre-recorded workshop in Elche in Spain. And then also there's another one I did at the same time, about half hour after that, which was about how to be a good referee. That's useful if you're an author. It shows you what referees are looking for. And also there's another short one here, about I think 7 or 8 minutes, how to write a good cover letter, which I created with an editor of mine up in Scotland back in December, and that went live on the Researcher Academy, I think in January or something. So that basically is a few resources that hopefully will help you, as well as the questions we're going to be answering today. So at that point, I'll leave this slide up for a little while, Shivra, so people can write down these URLs. Of course, this whole recording will be made available to you later, but if you're really desperate for this, you can actually then write this down now. Shivra, back to you.
Thank you, Dr. Newman. I think people are probably all have refreshed their memories of the recording, because I see many questions flowing in and some very, very good questions. We'll try to take as many as we can and club most of the similar ones together. To begin with, there are a lot of questions on how to choose the most appropriate journal for your research. And also, there is a particular question that how to choose a journal for publishing a review paper. So I think they want to know in general, when you are working on a research article, how do you choose a journal? And then there are a few questions on if you're writing a review article, then do you look at things differently then while choosing a journal?
Sure, I'll answer that one. And certainly there's, how do you choose a good journal? If you have several co-authors, some might have experience and they might help you in selecting a shortlist. With a shortlist, you then can go through and look at them as to what is their impact factor, what's their reach out there in the community. Are they your particular research community? Do they really focus on what you want to publish? That's the first thing. How fast are they? Are they real journals, not fake journals? There are a few fake, well, there are too many fake journals out there. And so these are all various sort of important things. There's also recently, Elsevier produced a journal finder tool, whereby if you put in the abstract and the keywords of your article in this particular place in Elsevier, it looks at all the various journals around there and suggests a bunch to you which might be useful. You don't have to go with those, but it gives you a clue, and you might want to go to a Springer journal or a Wiley journal based on the information that the tool has given you. I've got a stripe down my face with the sun. It's just come up. It's nice and bright and sunny here, and it's early in the morning, you can tell, so I have to move around a bit here. Yeah, so for review articles, it's a bit different. You've got to see which journals want to have review papers. Some are all review papers, so that's pretty easy, and some are not. And some journals, in the guide to authors, they tell you you can submit a review article, which is fine. Some say you cannot submit a review article unless you're invited. So you've got to then contact the editor first and say, I want to submit this review article to you. Do you want it? And that's also an important thing to do. In general, review-only journals are higher impact because reviews get higher citations, you've got to do a bit of homework using what you might have. You might have Scopus, you might have something like PubMed, and just see what's out there, and that should help you to see the best sort of journal. Go look in, say, PubMed or Scopus or Web of Science or whatever, using your keywords, see which journals come up, and that will tell you where they're being published currently. And that if they're being published there, that means the editors are looking for papers in those topic areas. Okay? I think that'll do for that one, or else we won't get done.
Okay, moving on to the next question. Since you talked about looking at the impact factor for journals, we have quite a few questions on impact factor. Is it the best metrics to look at when we are looking at a journal? And does different impact factor journals look for different style of writing and results? The way you present would change the type of journal or the ranking of impact factor where you publish. So does your writing affect that as well? So that's one of the questions that we have.
So
yeah,
can
Dr.
I answer
Khan,
this? Yeah.
Please, wonderful, thank you.
Yeah. So impact factor is, although it's an important parameter, but the thing is, if you have a good quality of work, so initially you can try with the high impact factor journals. If you get a positive response, then it's okay. Otherwise, gradually, if it is being rejected, then you come down to the low impact factor journal. So in that way, it is going to work. So it is impact factor that is going to make a lot of difference for your promotions and getting the project and other fundings. So please do consider the impact factor also. And initially, you should begin with this. And you should also assess that what is the quality of the work that you are sending to the journal. If it is really, it's having some good novelty, so try with some good high impact factor journal. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Khan. So I think that that's very important that you have a realistic view of the type of work that you have at hand. So that will be great. So
one extra thing on say,
yes,
I do know that there are some researchers who are wanting to publish in something like Cell or Nature or something, and that's a slightly different layout of article, and so they almost start to do the research around the fact they're going to be publishing it in, or want to publish it in Cell. It's a different sort of layout and structure, and when they start writing, they're doing it specifically for that journal. That's unusual. No, as Rizwan said, it basically is you have a cascade of journals. You start at the top and work down. But there are some specific top flight researchers who are researching just for that particular style of that particular journal, but it's unusual. Okay.
Yeah, thank you for adding on to that. So when we are talking about, publishing these high-end journals or some relatively very good journals, so when we talk about that the paper should be shaped up in a good manner, so we have quite a few questions on that because the editor would be reading the abstract and the title first. So how do you make the title or the abstract interesting, or the introduction interesting or attractive for people to read on and be hooked onto the paper? Yes.
Yeah, it's the title's important, of course, because the title has to hook you as a reader, and unfortunately, referees often don't comment on the quality of the title, and so we get some rather strange titles get published. You've got to think of a title that's short and snappy, and it's complete, and the two things are opposites. And then you've got to have it in such a style. Always make sure with the title that the main research topic is the first few words, because as humans we scan through all the list of titles and we look at the first few words, and if your wonderful last few words of your title is what it's all about, it won't be spotted by the human brain. So best to actually have it at the beginning of the title. That makes it very clear for the readers. So for the title, and of course, in that's for the reader, and of course, also the same applies to the editor. They look at the title, they look at the abstract, and the abstract's job is just to sum up what you've done. They also glance through at your figures before deciding how it should be handled in terms of peer review or death reject or whatever. So certainly the introduction has to be of interest. The abstract has to be of interest. The abstract is seen by everyone. The introduction is a way to put your work into context. So if you know that there's good researchers out there and you want to cite them, that's your introduction. And you explain why it was important to do this work, and then you explain what you've done in the methodology. So the introduction is your bridge from the title to why you've done the work.
Okay, thank you. So since we are talking about that the editor, first thing they read is look at the abstract and the title, and then even the reviewer then moves forward to the rest of the paper. So there are a lot of questions coming in from people that what are the basic reasons for articles getting rejected from the editor's side? Or if you put it in another way, the other questions are, what exactly do the reviewers or editors look for when they are looking at a new manuscript at hand?
That depends on the journal. If it's a sound science journal like Helion or PLOS ONE or something like that, then it just has to be sound science. But journals are also looking for novelty, so it should be novel as far as possible. But what an editor looks at first when they open it up is, does it look well written? Does it look polished? Is it bad English? If it's bad English, then straight away they're thinking, I can't let my readers see this. So does it have to be polished in revision stage, or is it just not even going out for peer review? So if it's not good enough quality in terms of all the various bad English, but badly laid out, also there has to be a sort of logical line running through it. And that's something that the referees will go through and see there's things not quite right. And so again, think of the reader. They don't want any confusion. They want to say, okay, here's what you did, here's what you found, here's what you think is going on, and that's a logical line running through it. And that's what many papers are a bit sort of sloppy. They're not well written. And in fact, editors, when they become new editors, are horrified at some of the junk that gets sent in. And it's sort of think, this shouldn't have been sent in to me, it shouldn't have been written. And so really, if you can be one of the authors who spent time looking at your paper, going through 3, 4, 5 different revisions, versionings, polishing it up, then sending it in, then you're already halfway there, because the editor will say, oh, that's a well-written paper. They're already starting to think along with you. Then they start looking at the content. If it's not very well written, and I know everyone thinks they write great English, we don't. Sometimes you need to be looked at by someone else who's a good English speaker and polish it, or sometimes even pay someone to polish the paper. You can't say, oh, I'll wait until revision. You won't get that far, you'll be rejected. So editors' job also is to look at what's the scope of the journal. Now, the scope of the journal is not always the same. It does change. It evolves slowly. And sometimes people will say, well, I saw an article published in the journal, therefore mine's on that topic, I'll send it in. But if it was an article of years ago, it might be that they had a change of aims and scope. And so therefore, what do you do about that? You use an editor to say, sorry, out of scope. And then the author gets a bit confused because it's not out of scope, but it might be almost out of scope because they're about to change their scope. These things do happen. It's confusing. It's annoying for authors because sometimes they feel they're not being treated well. And I agree with you. Sometimes editors are not as polite as they could be. It is what it is. But the important thing for everyone is that the journal publishes articles which are there forever. They are the scientific record. And so everyone has to be a bit careful that what's up there is good, because it's going to stay up there for long after we've passed on. Yeah. I digress slightly, sorry.
And Anthony, can I add something?
And please.
Say for instance, in the manuscript, if there are the 4 figures are there, what is generally being found that, say for instance, 1, 2, 3, and 4, in the result and discussion part, they are not being discussed in a proper order. So they are discussing about the figure 2, and in the text they are mentioning the figure 1. So that leads a lot of confusion. So whenever you are writing a manuscript, it is better you just describe one by one manuscript and make a paragraph, and then you construct a manuscript, and that way you can have a result and discussion part. So generally we found that people, they take it very lightly. They never bothered about the figure numbers. Say for instance, in some cases they put 3 or 4 figures in one figure, like for instance 2A, 2B, and 2C. Now what we found that they are describing about figure 2, and now instead of describing a figure A, they will jump to the B or C. This is not a right way. So once you have put 3 figures in one subset, so just start with a figure 2A, 2B, and 2C. That is the right way. Otherwise, even the editor and reviewer, they get annoyed by that. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a very, very good tip. Thank you. I'll use that in future when I'm doing my workshops.
Yeah.
Actually, that's a good one. So that kind of answers the next question that I was having at hand, because one should be properly organized and the format should be proper as to what they are writing. And because I had this another question which says that is the paper accepted based on the quality of work or on the skill of writing? But I guess the answers from both of you helps or has already answered this, because unless your skill of writing, as in if you're not able to have a proper paper in place which is understood by the reader, then even if you have some great science, you're not able to make the reader understand what you're trying to say. So all that good work goes waste. So yes, so both of them would be.
You got to have good content and good presentation.
Yes.
One without the other doesn't work.
Exactly. So thank you for that. And the next question that we have, because we are having a lot of questions based on where should they publish, because we talked about how to look at the journal. So there are questions as to whether publishing in open access is better or subscribed journals is better, what they should be going forward with, do they receive more citations in one, or what is more appropriate given the current situation in the South Asian countries?
I'll talk in general, and perhaps Rizal will want to talk about specifically about in Asia, but 80%, 85% of papers published are not in open access journals. And that's the reality now. Open access is a new business model. It's being seized by certain countries as a good way forward. And some funding bodies are really pushing for this. If your funding body wants you to publish open access and will pay you that open access fee, then fine, do it. If you have to dig into your own pocket and perhaps not feed the family or not have reagents for your next experiment, I'd say it's better just to publish in a subscription journal. Do you get more citations? We don't think so. It's about the same. Do you get more downloads? Open access? Yes, you do. So that's in a global area, but I know that specifically people in Asia want to showcase, highlight their work, and they feel open access is the way forward. It might be, but it's a very expensive option for some people. Dr. Khan, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree with you. What will be my suggestion, because what I have seen that presently we don't get a project from the different funding agencies, so we lack a fund. So it is better whatever the funds that is, somehow if we are going to get the money for the open access, so it's better you just utilize for your procuring the chemicals and other things, so that you can do a good quality of science instead of going for open access. So there is a financial crunch. So it's what I'll advise, it is not better to go for an open access.
Yeah.
Thank you. It does make sense that It all depends on the quality of your work. So if your work is good, it will be read and cited by people wherever you publish.
They'll find
That's
you.
true.
Yes, they'll
That's
find
true.
you. Yes. So main thing is you get your resources right to get the science first. Okay.
That's right.
Yeah,
You
if
have
you
to,
permit,
yeah, sure.
yeah, if you permit me, I can cite one example.
Yes, sir. Please.
There is one work from the India itself that is being published in a very low impact factor journal. That was the work that was being carried out by C.V. Raman.
Mhm.
And on that basis, he got a Nobel Prize. So it is not an impact factor that is going to decide the fate of the things. So if you are going to do a good quality of work, the people will follow you. You will get a is not impact factor.
Thank you,
Yeah,
sir.
but I don't think everyone's going to get the Nobel Prize though, but I agree with you. But it's and also it's surprising in life sciences how many Nobel laureates have published articles in a little journal called BBRC, with a little short article journal, just because that was the way forward. And it's interesting. Yeah. Anyway, yes, lots of questions, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Since we are there on the content of the paper, how quality content is important, we do have some questions. An interesting question. Should we be able to publish negative results of my new methodology? So do negative results can be published because probably they would help the other researchers? So that's one of the questions that we have got. And another thing is that since on review papers, so in the review papers, since it's more or less talking about the existing literature, should a review paper require any new methodology? So these are two questions that we have.
I'll go for the first one. You want to go the second one? What was the first one was again? It was briefly. It was. What's the question?
So can someone publish the
Negative results. Okay, right. The difficulty is that negative results, if you have a negative results journal, we tried to launch one years ago and no librarian would pay for it, which is annoying. And so open access is the way forward. But then again, we don't want people to publish open access if they can't afford it either. So often people hang on to their negative results and then they wait till they've got a good result and then they mention in their experimental work, previously we tried this, it didn't work. This does work. But at the same time, there is something called something like Mendeley data, or bioarchive and so on. And then what you can do is you can then publish your research data out there. It's out there, it's seen, it's visible, it has a DOI. It's free to publish these in Mendeley data or bioarchive. And what happens is that people can find that and then you're telling them, I did this, it didn't work. And it's a heads up for people not to waste time, resources, perhaps laboratory animals on repeating the experiment. So you need to publish it. You probably have a problem publishing it in a conventional journal, but you can certainly publish it in an archive place, so basically a preprint server, like Mendeley data or bioarchive or similar. And that way, it's out there, it's findable, you've got a DOI. And down the road, when you do publish something that does work, you can cite your previous negative results using the DOI where it is in Mendeley data. That's my take on that. Any thoughts on that, Rizwan?
Yeah, I agree with you. Only thing is the person has to be very sure about that. Once he want to publish a negative data, at least he should perform 10 times or 15 times. So that he should be very, very, very much sure about that whatsoever the data that he's going to put into the data bank. So it is, it may be useful for at some time.
Yeah.
Yes.
And also by publishing it there, you have a date line on it. So it's linked to you. The same thing with any research. I know I saw a question coming in about people are being worried about theft of their data whilst it's in the peer review process. If you published it as a pre-paper, as a preprint in say bioarchive or in Mendeley data, what happens is that your name is linked to that particular topic, to that particular set of keywords on a particular date. So that is your intellectual property right on that date. So if anyone publishes anything on that later, with your information, you have the prior provable date, so that they can't steal your work because you've already pre-published it, basically.
And the next part to this question was, is the review paper requiring any new methodology?
Can I comment on that?
Sure, off you go.
Can I? Yeah.
Yep.
So for the review article, you don't need a new methodology. Only thing is, in the review article, you are supposed to propose some new hypothesis. So whatever the previous literature that is going to say, you just read those papers and then try to make some hypothesis that if we are going to add something more in this direction, so we are going to lead some good results. Anthony, you want to add something?
Yeah, I agree that in the old days, the review was just a collection of literature and you get some comments out of it, but now you've got to somehow evaluate what you're reading and add value to it. And I think that's the difference in these last 10 years. In the past, it was the review was just a précis of what's out there, the list of references, and now you actually have to add your own personal comment, evaluation, and that adds the value to the paper. Yeah.
That means you can propose some hypothesis after reading all those papers.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So next we have quite a few questions on the process of the publishing, rather, as in how much time does actually the editor ideally should be taking to desk reject or approving the manuscript to go further into review. So ideally, when somebody has submitted the manuscript, how long they should be waiting, and after that they should start get worried, is the question in that manner.
Yeah. Well, let's start off with, it comes in. It takes about a day to be processed internally and to get the plagiarism report. It goes off to the editor. The editor normally opens up their dashboard every 1, 2, 3 days, depending how busy the journal is, and they see there's a paper come in, they look at it, and then they decide, is it good enough for peer review or not? If they look through it and it's not good enough for peer review, they should handle that basically the same day. So within a week, you should have heard back if it's not good enough for peer review. And then if it goes out to peer review, then it can take that, and it gets annoying to the editor because the referees are given a week or two, and sometimes they take a month or more. And sometimes they'll wait and it times out and the editor has to find new people. And there has been cases where the editor has asked 10 different referees to find 2 who will say yes. Or an editor will say, I want this particular person to be one of the referees. And they say, well, I'm on a business trip now. I can't start looking at it in 3 weeks' time. And the editor says, I'll wait. I need your comments. So it's reasonable to ask the journal after a month what the progress is if you've heard nothing. And sometimes an editor would even write back to the author and say, I'm sorry, it's taking a while. It's the referees that are doing these things. But yeah, and sometimes it even gets to a stage where no one can be found within the network of the editor. And so they think, well, we're declining your paper eventually because we couldn't find anyone in our field to review it. Therefore, you probably are submitting it to the wrong field. So please go somewhere else, which is sad, but it's the reality. So yeah. How do you do it, Rizwan, when you get papers in? You're an editor of one of my journals.
Yeah. So what I have feeling that some people, they accept the invitation for reviewing the paper and they keep that paper for 1 or 2 months. We keep on sending the reminder and they won't respond. They after sending a 5 or 6 reminder, once we get a pressure from the author that what is the status of my article. So in that way, we are supposed to contact the reviewers, and they will say, I will respond back, respond back. In that way, we are going, and at the end, after 2 or 3 months, they refuse. They start, either they refuse it or they won't respond back. So this is a very tough condition. I don't know in that situation what we should do. It becomes a very embarrassing, because now the author, they think that editor is doing something deliberately, but it is not like that. So
No, no.
we we get the comments that like, why you are holding the manuscript for such a long time. We said that we have sent the reviewer for 4 or 5 people, but they have accepted that we cannot send to more people, because of once so we are just waiting for the response. So this is the thing that we are facing now. I don't know what things that how come we can address this issue.
I know that the many editors, if they get back one referee's comments in and they can't get the other one in after multiple times, they'll become the second referee and read through the article, and that's not their job. Their job is actually to manage the peer review, but sometimes they do that just to help out the editor, to help out the author. And of course, the editorial board members we have, sometimes we say, look, we've got one person that has let us down. Can you quickly look at this paper just to help us out? And that's another way, because it's not ideal, but it's a way to move the paper forward, because the poor author needs to know what's up, what's happening. And often, in this case, it's probably going to be a revision, so therefore they need to get working on it, and they need to know what's going on. And you're right, Rizwan. It's I think referees, or researchers, are schizophrenic. As an author, they want it instantly, and as a reviewer, they think they've got all the time in the world.
I guess it was really good to have both a publisher as well as an editor and a researcher on the panel today, because it gives us the insights to what's happening behind the screen, and the audience, I think they're lucky enough today to hear all this. So going forward with this review thing, only because we're talking about reviewers, sometimes the authors are asked that you suggest reviewers, right? And if those reviewers take time, then your paper is hung. But the question is, many of them are asking, who do you suggest as reviewers if you are asked? And is it compulsory that you have to give suggestions? And if they want to give, then how do they look for the reviewers?
Some journals make it compulsory. When you're submitting online, you get to one bit of the submission process, you have to provide a certain number of referees. That is fixed. Some journals give guidelines in the aims and scope, and so the guide to authors as to what they want. But if a journal does not ask for referees, still provide them in the covering letter, just so that we have a situation that it helps the editor just in case they can't find the right people. How do you find them? Well, see who's published similar articles to yours. Also have a look at your introductory paragraph. Who have you cited there? Because those people might be good people to suggest as referees. They might be too busy, but they have a postdoc and might do it instead. And also, if you are going to be listing people as potential referees, have you cited them? If you haven't cited them and they're experts in the field, why haven't you cited them? If I was a referee and I looked through a paper and I saw I wasn't being cited, I might think, why aren't I being cited? So you're annoying the potential referee too. So think about who you're choosing. I would look at your references. I look at introduction. That's a good start. It could be you saw someone at a recent conference and you think they're a great person, or you read an interesting article. Also, people you can suggest. It's not often the case that all your suggestions will be used. Often the editor will use one of theirs, one of yours, or two of theirs, and if one turns down, one of yours, and so on. But at the same time, do it with care, because the editors also look at the referee suggestions to see if you know who is appropriate. So they're actually evaluating you as a person, as a scientist. Do you know who's good people? Because if they know your suggestions, they'll think, oh, okay, they know what they're doing. So yeah, it's worth spending the extra half hour just to get those names in there.
I can add one
Yes.
thing. It's better. For instance, if you're working in one country, so it's better you suggest all the reviewers outside your country. So that is going to make the editor comfortable. If you are going to suggest the reviewer from your own country, because that will be approachable to you. Although people, they can approach from outside the country also. But the thing is, if you are going to give a maximum numbers of the reviewers, those they are from the different countries. That is the good strategy.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that. I see that we are already at 12, so the time that we had scheduled, but we have a lot of questions still pouring in. So I would just like to ask Dr. Khan and Dr. Newman, would they want to go for another 10 minutes or so?
I'm good. My next appointment is in 1 hour.
Okay. Dr. Khan, are you
10 minutes,
comfortable
10,
to
10 minutes,
take,
okay.
okay, 10 minutes more of questions?
Yeah.
Okay. So, because I see the interest quite peaked up and many questions are coming in. Okay, so I get this question that when we are choosing our journals for submitting a manuscript, is it necessary that that journal should be referenced, cited within our paper, like top 10% article cited in our, that manuscript should be from the journal that we are submitting to? Should that be the case?
I would say that if you have a niche field, then there should be many citations to articles in the journal. If it's a broad field, say biophysics or biotechnology or something, then I don't think it's as important. But certainly you should have at least one article from that journal. But in some fields are so niche that probably a third of the articles will come from that journal. But that's just a depends on the sort of field you're going to be publishing in. Do you agree, this one? No. Silence. Okay. Moving on.
Dr. Khan?
Yeah,
Yes.
I missed somehow there was some problem in my audio.
Okay.
Yeah, it happens. No, I was just saying that, yeah, whatever. Or you want to add on, but as we've got so many questions, we'll keep on going. I suspect it's hundreds of questions. Heavens. Right. Sorry. Yes.
Yes.
I should answer succinctly, maybe.
So he was talking about when an author is submitting a manuscript to a journal. So should he or she be citing that journal quite a bit in his her manuscript? So should that be the case? So Dr. Newman was talking about.
I have come across there is in some journal there is a policy. Even the editor also they request that.
Okay.
That you are supposed to cite a few articles from that particular journal so that their impact factor that may goes up. But regarding the Elsevier, we don't have any such policy.
Okay. Thank you. So now we have a very, very interesting question. And it says, does the country of origin really matter to publish in good quality journals? So does your affiliation matter?
In a perfect world, no. It's not a perfect world, but at the same time, there is not a bias against the third world for sure. It's unfortunately that the developing countries have not yet got the skill to write good articles and do the research or describe the research they're doing well. And that's why it's so important to have these sorts of webinars so we can actually get good articles written, because the science is amazing, it's out there, but the presentation lets them down, and then it's seen as a bias. And you have people from certain countries who have, say India, who have English as a central language, but often the quality of the written English is not up to scientific standards to publish in top journals. And so that again seems almost like a slight that I speak English. Yeah, but it's not good enough English. And so that way you've actually got to do the polishing to make sure that your your research shines through in quality presentation.
Okay.
There was one article I saw, one question I saw was, can we publish if we don't have an institute?
Yes.
That's an interesting one, because what happens is you're between institutes. You finish the research, you want to publish it, and you're now looking for your next place. You're at home. If you did your research somewhere, then it's reasonable to list that as your affiliation. If you are writing a review article and you're between institutes, you can then put your home address, but in your covering letter to the editor, you say, this is a review. I was at this institute. I'm looking for a job or a new position in this field. This is a review I've written in the meantime to keep my hand in, and it's interesting to me. And the editor should not be upset by that. It's important. You're not banned from submitting if you're not linked to an institute. If the research was done at an institute, if you do have research and you're not at an institute, my question is, how can you do the research if you're not at an institute? You don't have the facilities, you don't have the permissions, all the other bits and pieces which are around doing research.
Thank you for that. So actually, I also came across this very question from a friend of mine, so who's between jobs, and she wanted to publish a review. So that helps. So another interesting question, since we are talking about, the limited abilities in certain countries and all that. So we have this question that if we have limited research facilities, but we have some good ideas flowing in, is it still possible to come out with a good paper? Because nowadays, all the papers demand the new cutting edge technology to be used for the research work. So in case of such constraints, is it still possible?
If you've got a good idea and you can put it together in a good way, you've got to make sure that you can have a network out there of collaborators and between you. So a researcher at an institute does have the kit, can do an certain experiment. You provide some intellectual experience and discussion, and between 2, 3, 4 of you in different institutes or even different countries, you come up with a research project which you can publish that uses the best of the brains of the person who thought out the experiment in India, plus the kit of someone in Sweden or in Britain or Australia or somewhere. Then together you have this article, which is what it's all about. The more co-authors you have in different countries, the higher you get, interestingly. So the wider the network you can have, you get access to resources, and at the same time you co-publish with these people, and it's part of your international network you build up over years.
Can I add something? It's a good idea whatsoever Anthony he has said, but to make the other person more comfortable, he should have some preliminary data also, so that other person, he may realize that whatsoever he's talking about, he is having some supportive evidence for that also. Otherwise, he will feel that everything is in air. So you should have some preliminary data, and don't share the data with him. You just say that we have worked under these conditions and we have got these results which are very promising. And if you are going to fill up these gaps, so we can have some good publications. So in that way, the person will be having an idea that he has already achieved 30% things. Now only 70% thing that will be get covered. And for that, he can just distribute 40% and 30% to the 2 or 3 different labs. So in that way, it will be get done.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's an interesting way.
You're maintaining the intellectual focus going forward as it's your concept. And you want people to help out by using their kit, which they happen to have lying around doing nothing in the next room. Exactly. And if you've got access to someone's $300,000, $400,000 mass spec machine in UK, and you don't have one, great. It does the job.
So Anthony, even for getting a research grant also, we are supposed to put some preliminary data. Once we are going to put in some preliminary data, only then it becomes some supportive evidence So then it is easy to get the grants also.
Good. Yeah.
Since you talked about the grant and funding point, Dr. Khan, we have received one question where they say that sometime when you're, just beginning with your research, you don't have publications in that field lined up. So do the funding agencies also look at your publication profile? Like if you are submitting, so then as a new researcher in that area, perhaps they have the preliminary data to support that. But as a new researcher, is it advisable that they go ahead with the funding like that, or they tag along with a senior uh, researcher, professor in that area who's been working, and it'll be easier that way?
I think during the PhD program, he might have produced some papers. So that is the one. So that is going to become a supportive evidence that that person was productive during his PhD program.
Yes.
Another thing is once he is going to join as a faculty, and if he is having some preliminary data, so that is going to be very, very, very supportive to get a grant. I can assure them. And the best thing is he shouldn't ask for a very big grant. In Indian perspective, he can ask for 10 lakhs or 20 lakhs, something like UGC and CSR.
Yes.
So they can easily fund that.
Yes, that's very helpful. So I think we'll take one sort of last question, so which is I'll combine few questions together because that's one thing that's coming up again, and that's plagiarism. So one, how to avoid plagiarism. Two, because a review of literature will cite a lot of material which is already written about, which is already published. So how does the plagiarism check happen at the review of literature portion? And again, same thing, not only for the review literature which they are using in the introduction, but also methodology, because in methodology, it's usually the same thing that the scientists are doing, repeating similar set of methods and technologies. So it's difficult to rewrite them. You just copy paste usually. So how does that happen? And
Yeah.
one last thing, how is it about with self-citations? Because you're citing your own papers. So self-plagiarism, how much role does it play during the screening of a paper?
Right. So it's 5 questions in one. Okay.
Yes.
I'll do a few, and then perhaps at the end Rizwan can add his bit. Certainly, you have to self-cite yourself, because if you don't self-cite yourself and you're repeating information in the paper, it is self-plagiarism. I've had people who say, I didn't want to put all my previous papers in because it looks like I'm actually I'm being too self-important. And so they left out a whole bunch of self-citations, and that they were actually accused of being of self-plagiarizing. So always make sure you cite all your previous work. Secondly, we in the industry use something called cross-check. Now, cross-check is Authenticate, which is a cousin to Turnitin, which is used by universities to check theses. There are online free plagiarism checks which do not check against the literature databases. That's unfortunate. So people might check it using a certain system and it says it's fine, but in fact when it gets put through Authenticate, it comes back with a score. It's called an overlap score, or a plagiarism score. It's a bit tough way of saying it. An overlap score. The overlap score of anyone is always going to be a few percent, 10%, 15%, whatever. At a certain point, people start to look. And if it's blocks of text, because then the editor can see what the overlap score is and what's generating it, they'll think that's not good. That means there's too much of an overlap. That it's plagiarizing previous work. If you are going to be using other people's work, and you will be, of course, because you're going to be citing them, when you start doing your draft manuscript, put their text in little inverted commas in your draft, so you know it's not your words. Because that way you know that down the road you've either got to rewrite that, so it actually still keep the reference in, but rewrite that, in a way that it's not their words, so it doesn't show up as plagiarism, or you keep the speech marks in because you can't find a better way of saying it, and then that way everyone knows, the editors, referees, and readers, that it's not your text, and that's, you cited that, it's someone else's. That's fine. What's a real score for plagiarism? Again, it varies. If you get a high score, the editor can rerun the report by cutting out the references, the affiliations, and can cut out methodology. And that gives you a different number. But the methodology, you're right, you cannot, in fact, you confuse a reader. If it's only a certain particular method, the Lowry method of purifying proteins, you're not going to rewrite that. As it confuses everyone, you might just as well say, no, this is what we did, and it's, again, almost cut and paste. But the fact you're saying that you did this by a standard method and you're then writing it, it's only 3, 4, 5 ways you can actually write a method. So if that's the case, that's the case. And editors will not take it badly if they see that there's a high overlap score. They look at it, and in fact, that's all coming around the methodology. They think, oh, fine, it's methodology, doesn't matter. And that's great. And so always be aware, it's not just a magical black, white, that's it. It's always a guideline for an editor to look at to see what you've done. But again, many people get caught out because they don't put little speech marks. They don't realize it wasn't their text. 4 or 5 co-authors, 5 different versions, polishing as you go. It's easy to forget what's yours or what's not yours. That's a good tip to keep going forward. So if you've got, if you're accused of self-plagiarism, then you've got to decide what to do about it. Is it true? Did you actually not properly cite yourself? Do you fix it somehow by adding a few citations to yourself? What happens? How can you avoid that? Make sure all of your work is actually well cited. Everyone whose work you've used is mentioned. And it's sometimes you'll rewrite an article for a different audience. It might be the first time you wrote the article was for, say, scientists. And the next time you're going to rewrite it using the same data set, a different description, a different discussion, you're discussing it for doctors, for MDs. And therefore, you've got to be very transparent in your opening introduction. You say, I've previously published this reference, and here I'm going to be discussing all about the applications in the medical world using the same data set. So you're being very transparent. And then you also mention that in the covering letter to the editor. So you're saying, in effect, it's not a duplicate publication. It actually is a new version because it's a different audience. And you're very transparent in your introductory paragraph. You mentioned this. And that is a way that is very important, the transparency. You're not trying to cheat. You're just being very clear. Here's what's going on. So these are, I think, most of the points covered in your various questions, Shubhra. Is that right?
Yes.
I think so. Right, Rizwan, any extra thoughts?
Yeah, a lot of time I get a query from the authors that how much this plagiarism is permissible in the IJBM. So can you just comment on that?
Well, how much is the overlap allowed?
Yeah.
Yeah. How long is a piece of string? I would say an editor should look carefully at a paper if the report is higher than 35%. If it's under 35%, I'd say let it go. And if it's more than, and then when you look at that, you then go deeper into the attached report, which comes with the manuscript that's been run by our people in Chennai. And then they can come up and you can see, is it blocks of text? If it's blocks of text, that's different. If it's not blocks of text, if it's scattered throughout the whole thing, then probably it's a different thing. So does that help? Doing two things at once. We're not working from home. We're at home trying to work. Let's face it, all of us are. It's a big difference.
Yeah. Additional challenges.
Sorry, I was disconnected again.
Yeah. So you heard some of my thoughts about plagiarism. I said, yeah. I know.
Yeah. So I missed that. I think generally once I found that if it is 30% or 40% plagiarism is there, so I generally reject that manuscript. So is it okay for some journals like Elsevier's?
Well, what I would do is, if it's that high a number, I would look at the report itself and see the blocks of text. And if there are blocks of text, then you know there's something wrong. If it's literally scattered throughout and it's a lot of methodology and it's all in methodology, then you can be a bit more lenient. I once had an article.
What will be my suggestion?
Yep. Okay.
Yeah. What will be my suggestion? That it's better that we should focus on the methodology and the result and discussion part. If they are having more than 10% of the plagiarism, so in that case, that will maybe a serious matter. Do you agree with this?
I agree. Certainly with the description of the methods and the discussion, and certainly the analysis of those results, there should be very, very low level of overlap. Because otherwise it's not a unique article. It's something you found somewhere else and have adapted. I once had an editor say to me, I heard an article came in with 100% overlap. Wow, I said, what was it? He said he got it all from Wikipedia. It was a review article on biotechnology. I said, what are you going to do? He said, I think I'll treat this as an educational exercise and educate him how he should write a review and not be nasty to him and ban him for 2 years. Because editors can ban you for submitting for 2 years if you cheated. You just use it as just as, look, you don't know what you're doing. Here's how you're going to do that. So apparently he had a nice phone call, explained to the guy, this is not what you do when you're writing a review. And it's that's part of the job of an editor also, is to educate the authors what they should do, what they shouldn't do.
Exactly. Thank you.
So I think with this, we'll end the question answer round today. And although we have close to 600 questions piled up, but perhaps we can have another session sometime later for all this. But I would really like to express my sincere gratitude to you, Dr. Newman, and to you, Dr. Rizwan, for all your help and support for this program today. I think the audience, including me, we have been privileged to hear the background story, how it goes, at the publisher end, the editor end, what the reviewer thinks and does. It makes it more clearer for us how the process flow is and what are the things that we should be taking care of while developing our manuscript. And Dr. Newman for joining in from Amsterdam so early in the morning, kind of rushing through his breakfast for the call today. And Dr. Rizwan, I understand there are bandwidth issues and most of us are facing that. In fact, I was worried throughout the session that, my Wi-Fi kind of sustains me and I do not have certain erratic behavior in between. So thank you so much. You didn't have the video, but still, you kind of persevered through. Yes, Dr. Newman, you want to say
one final thing, reminded people, check out the recording on how to be a good referee, because you'll see what we want referees to look at. And then you think when you're writing your paper, good referees will look at all the training points that we've given them, and that helps you make your paper even better.
So maybe what I'll do is the links, the URL that you shared in the slide, I will share the URLs with all our attendees. So,
okay, thank you.
They can just visit those sites. And I would like to thank, although Sharon or Sumit, they are not here, but the two of them have been instrumental to having this program together and to get you guys on board. So I'm really thankful to them as well. And to the audience for being so enthusiastic. Even during lockdown, they spared so much of their time for this session and they went through the recording, most of them. So that's heartening. And just a small thing from my side that I would request the audience to kindly participate in the feedback survey so that it will help us to understand how we can support you better. This is the first time we brought out this program in such a unique format. So we would like to know whether you liked it and whether, things, you would be looking forward to such things so that, we can keep on working with the experts to help you in your road to research excellence. So thank you, everyone.